Welcome back to Woman, Conversations in Black and White. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Linda. We are recording our conversations in black and white for you, our viewers, for us to learn from each other, to deepen our sense of our shared humanity, and to encourage you to talk across racial lines about sensitive topics as well. And today's topic, Bernadette?
Today's topic we are calling Parenting in Black and White. And Linda and I are in different stages of our parenting. She has adult children and the blessings of 3 beautiful grandchildren. I am still in the active throes of parenting kiddos. I have a 17-year-old and a 13-year-old. So not biddies, but we've both been through that stage. But we have often had conversations off camera about the challenges of just parenting in general and our general apprehensions and concerns that Linda had when she was raising her children, the things she has apprehensions and concerns for her grandkids. And we have shared those, but there have been lots of things that I have shared with Linda that Linda came to recognize that I never had to think about that, or that was never an issue or a concern. It just never was. And so we wanted to take an episode and speak to things of that nature, just to give all of our viewers an understanding that even though there are many similarities and overlaps in our lives, there are some that simply never will cross, and unfortunately is based solely on race. Would you say that's
yeah?
Would you agree with that, Linda?
Yeah, I would agree. And you mentioned a specific, as we were talking about this episode, you mentioned a specific thing that you have to do as a Black parent about friends, families, that sort of thing. You want to speak to that?
And so we were talking about, we both live in a suburban area, so it is predominantly white, and my children are Black. And so all kids have friends. And so every parent is concerned about, who their kids are spending time with. You want to know what their families are like, what their, parents are like, how they're going to be treated. So we all have those. But then I also wonder, okay, so is the household, are they aware that Solomon is Black? Are they okay with Black people? Because it's one thing for the kids to a certain extent to be friends with each other, but when Black person shows up at your home, sometimes that can be a different experience. And so we have to monitor and fill those things out. And then we also, since my youngest Solomon is a boy, Black boys are only looked at as Black boys for a certain amount of time, and then they're deemed a threat, and no one knows when that magical day happens until it happens. And so I have to be concerned if something happens or the boys are out somewhere or they are approached, will their parents stand up for my child in the way that I would, or in the way that I would stand up and speak for their child? Or would they let him just be scapegoated because he's a Black boy? And so those are different things and fears that are specific to Black parents. And then there's also a tradition here that our high schoolers have what's called Nerf wars, where they run around different, subdivisions and neighborhoods shooting guns at each other. I have never let my children participate in that, nor will I ever. And that is not only fear because of the police may say, well, they had a weapon, even though it was a Nerf gun. It can be a random white homeowner who sees a Black kid in their yard with what they deem to be a weapon. Even though this is a normal, long-standing tradition, I will not put my children in those predicaments or situations. So there are things that all of their friends get to participate in and enjoy and just experience in life growing up, that Black parents or parents of children of color, we don't get to live that freely. And so that is a additional stress and layer that is on top of the stresses and layers of parenting children that I have to contend with. That was never an issue or a concern for you.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And as they say about white privilege, it says white privilege doesn't mean your life hasn't been hard. It just means that the color of your skin isn't one of the factors that made your life be hard. And that's it. We all can have hard lives and fears and all that, but I never worried about the color of my skin being a reason, or my sons or my daughter or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So that's in addition to everything I might have dealt with. This is one that you have to deal with as a parent.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and it is, and it is not only difficult to deal with as a parent, it is also difficult to find the words to explain to your kiddos why you can and can't do this only because of the race that you are.
mm-hmm.
Like, I know all of your friends do that, and that sounds like a lot of fun, sugar, but I can't let you do this because this is how it could be misconstrued solely for you, only because you're Black.
Right.
And so we have to teach those unfairnesses and learn and help them how to start coping with those indignities and injustices at home, in life, early in life, in the hopes of making it through life. And that has been one of the most heartbreaking parts of parenting, trying to raise Black children. That is heartbreaking, to have to fracture those parts of themselves in hopes that will protect them from potential harm. That is very painful to have to do.
I'm sure it is. Mm-hmm. I've watched my little grandchildren, and I'm not sure what I did as a parent. We were lucky that no one in the family died when they were really young. And, every parent wants to protect their child from death. And you hope that maybe a pet that they don't love too much dies and you can talk about it a little bit or something early. But no one in my family died extraordinarily, when they were little. So we didn't have to deal with that for a period of time. And now as I watch my grandchildren, I'm aware of it too. It's like, oh, I don't want to have to talk about this hard stuff. They're only 4, they're only 5, they're only 6, and I don't want to have to deal with this yet. I mean, there's enough hard stuff in life, like that kid was a bully or whatever, but you don't want to have to deal with the really hard stuff. And to deliberately have to do that, as you would, before it happens, if possible, to protect your child is hard. Like, how do you choose the moment, and how do you say life isn't fair, and it's especially not fair because you are Black, and I'm really sorry, but this is the truth, and you have to learn these things, and those are hard things. You don't want to squelch your child's spirit, but you want to protect them at the same time.
Yes, which means you, to a certain extent, you have to squelch certain parts of their spirits. But the most heartbreaking for me is that you have to steal the innocence that children should be allowed to have. Right. And so I have had to, and millions of Black mothers behind me and in front of me, and fathers have to choose the time and points to steal parts of their children's innocence in the hopes of preserving their life. And that shouldn't have to be.
No, I agree. Well, I'm glad you brought that in. As people, as our viewers think about where do they stand on how much do we educate children at school about racism, this touches on that too. We were talking about schools in the episode, but it touches on that as young as 4 and 5 and 6, a Black child may very well experience racism, and it could be pretty brutal or pretty frequent or both. And so it's like, if a child of 4 or 5 or 6 may experience racism in our culture, in our public schools and outside the schools, then at what point do we start teaching all the children that this is a thing and that it is wrong and that we have to treat each other with respect regardless of colors? So I don't think it's too early in time, but too early to teach the reality of what is and try to reconcile. I find myself teaching my little grandchildren about car manners. Why should you have manners in the car? And oddly, my grandson, they were getting ready to go on a big trip, and so I was trying to help because I drove them here from Overland Park, and they were they were rowdy, and I was not patient with rowdiness in the car. And yet I'm the grandma, so I don't really want to yell at them hard. But I dealt with it. And once I'd stopped the car, I said, okay, so when I ask you for good manners in the car, why should we have good manners? Why don't we just, none of us have manners. Why don't we just do it that way? And they looked at me like, seriously? And then the little boy, Max, he says, it's so we can all get along. That's why we have manners. And Millie then said some version of the same thing. And I thought, well, duh, that's exactly right. That's why we have manners, because manners is kind of a word for respect and kindness and mutual respect and so forth. Yes. So I was actually very proud of them. That stayed with me, that even though they were not exhibiting manners for the last 20 minutes prior to that, they actually knew why manners was a desirable thing. So when we get into schools, it's like racial respect and respect of each other is what we're dealing with. And in a casual home setting, it might be called manners, but it's the same thing. It's mutual respect and mutual kindness. And it's so we can all get along.
And recognizing that our journeys are different. So Linda and I have both said that we know we have Black and white viewers who watch us, but if we have white parents that are watching us, have conversations with your children about racial topics. If your kids have friends that are people of color, if they don't, or if they want to invite people of color over to have spend the nights, recognize that those parents, especially Black parents, their apprehension or their anxiety is valid and long-standing, and acknowledge that. It is okay for you to say, I know this is a rough time right now. I will make sure to keep an extra eye on your child. I will let you, if anything goes, I will let you know. That would be like so don't be afraid to say those words and to acknowledge those realities that parents are having to live through, just because you don't have to.
Right.
Yeah.
Perfectly said. And I think that going clear back to when you and I began talking and brought our families into it, that Bernadette and I have a lot in common. We live 4 houses away from each other. We live on the same street. We both like plants and gardening. We have children. She's a counselor. I'm not a counselor, but I have a lot of interest in human healing and, psychology, and a lot that we have in common. But we don't have our skin color in common. And that has resulted in a very different experience in her life every day from mine every day. And it's like, to not know that is a loss. And that's what these conversations have brought home, is not only about systemic racism, but also about the reality of living while Black or living while white. And that's been really important for us to know, because it develops empathy, and it can do the same thing in children. And I don't know how to teach about racism to young children, but I know that there are people that do. So that's worth doing to alleviate and cross some of those bridges and help Black parents as they raise their children to feel a little more heard and a little safer, and those things, while we're dealing with the big thing.
Right. Yes. And recognize that you can't talk about it. Parents are children's first teacher. So talk about it. I mean, they already know what's going on. Talk about it.
Right. And as has been said, the question was asked, at what point in your life, how old were you when you learned that if you had a choice, it was better to be white than to be Black?
Right. And a whole lot earlier than most people think.
Right, exactly. And even white people who are racist or are not racist will say, no, I'd rather be white. It's easier, it's better. Life treats you better. And that's all true. And children learn this way earlier than we wish, but they do.
Around 3 or so, have those conversations. Feel free to talk to Black parents or parents of color. Asian Americans right now, I'm sure it's been challenging parenting their children and teaching them things, because this has been relatively new for them to have to deal, I would say, to have to deal with such targeted, blatant hate. So they have to get their children prepared for what's going to slap them in the face when they walk out the door, or Hispanic parents. So to assume that all parenting challenges or issues are the same is a falsehood.
Right.
There are different challenging and issues, and unfortunately responsibilities that go with parenting children of color that white parents never have to.
Right.
Never crosses their radar.
Right.
So we need to start plugging into other people's radars to see what we can do.
Other
so
people's
this doesn't
radars.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that way we
Stepping
can
back.
all so that way we can all just worry about the same thing. Like, oh my God, I got a 16-year-old. My insurance is going to go through the roof. Let's just all be able to complain about that. Where I'm like, oh my God, I got a 16-year-old. If you get pulled over, I need you to do this, and this.
Right.
We need to work on eliminating that.
Exactly. Exactly. So
Work on
well done.
eliminate that. Yeah.
All right.
All right. So that's what we had for this week's topic. As we always say, start talking, keep talking, and we look forward to seeing you real soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.